Should the Holy Roman Empire and the Papal States be reestablished?
Sure. Now what? No, I'm not going to give you a cheap answer like that. Well, firstly, we have to, again, it goes back to defining our terms. All right. Let's deal with the second one, the Papal States first. And the real question there is whether or not the Pope should be a temporal sovereign.
Okay.
That's the real question. And of course he is, of a dinky little place called Vatican City, which nevertheless has ambassadors, nuncios all over the world. In fact, the combined acreage of all its different nunciatures is probably bigger than the Vatican.
Wow, yeah.
But where did the temporal sovereignty of the popes come from? Because, of course, it didn't pop up from nowhere.
Right.
Obviously, St. Peter was not a temporal sovereign. None of the popes under Roman persecution were temporal sovereigns. So where did these papal states come from? Well, the answer is that they came from as the Byzantine Empire lost its hold on Italy. They came first from the popes who already had had all sorts of donations of land in Italy, coming up with ways of defending them. It came about with the collapse of civil administration in the city of Rome, and the Pope having to take over for it. I mean, there was a reason why this happened.
Yeah.
There's no governor in Rome. Well, who do we appeal to? Well, it was the Pope. And this happened in cities throughout what had been the Roman Empire, and especially in Italy, that the local bishop became the temporal ruler because there was suddenly no more government. To give you a modern parable to explain it, imagine the zombie apocalypse happening, and all the government flee or get eaten. And the only figure of any authority you've got left here in LA is the Archbishop.
Wow.
And there's nobody else to come to. So what's left of the National Guard, the police, the food distribution systems, the fire systems, they all turn to Archbishop Gomez and say, what do we do? And Archbishop Gomez, having come from a noble family at the end of the Roman Empire, part of his education was governance, leadership.
Wow.
So what is, I mean, not in real life, I'm saying.
Oh, I see.
In the late Roman Empire.
Oh, okay.
So he says, well, okay, Popo, you police the neighborhood, start wiping out them zombies. National Guard, you start building a wall around central LA. Food distribution people, start growing food in all the vacant lots. And that was how, I mean, one of the things, too, that the popes of that era did was through their private estates outside of the city, they kept the city fed with grain grown on their own estates. So that was where the beginning of the Pope running Rome and its environs came from. Eventually, the city militia that had already existed started reporting to the Pope of the day. It was a gradual thing. They didn't sit around thinking this out. But then it acquired a bigger meaning. The Frankish kings and then the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne donated central Italy to the papacy. Now, why was this important? Well, it was important because by the time the faith became an independent power, with Catholics in every nation of Europe, the danger arose that the Pope would become a sort of chaplain to whatever major ruler lived. And temporal independence was one of the ways of trying to guarantee that he didn't simply become the court chaplain of the Byzantine Emperor, the court chaplain of the Holy Roman Emperor, the court chaplain of the King of France, or whoever happened to dominate Rome at that moment. So, the temporal sovereignty of the Pope is extremely important because it allows him neutrality. Now, mind you, it also has another temptation, which is for him to become a player.
Right.
And this has happened, you know. But, as I like to remind people, the abuse of a system does not by itself negate the value of the system.
Right.
If it did, there is nothing you can think of in this world that's any good.
Right. That's one of my big pet peeves is they throw this stuff at the church, like look at these people, but they don't throw it at anything else,
No.
like presidents or anything.
If you held everyone up and everything up to the same standard the enemies of the church hold for the church, then nothing could stand.
You're right.
You know, I mean, I remember when I was in D.C. during the Great Page Scandal in '82, I remember thinking, boy, if only congressmen could marry, this would never happen. That's true.
Yeah.
If President Kennedy or President Clinton could have gotten married, they never would have had affairs. What? Isn't that true? No?
That's true.
Yeah, well. Anyway, I digress. So, as far as the Papal States go, the first question is it good for the Holy See to have temporal sovereignty? I'd say, yeah. Now then, the question is, what about the territories that they actually had? Yeah. I mean, part of the problems you run into is the question of Italian nationalism versus the rights of the Holy See.
Yeah.
And it also is not just the Holy See, because remember that the Sardinians had to conquer the Lombardo-Venetian kingdom that was under the Emperor of Austria, the Duchy of Parma that was under a branch of the Bourbons, the Duchy of Modena that was under a branch of the Habsburgs, as was the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, a different branch, and your particular favorite, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which was all of southern Italy.
Yeah.
And that was yet another branch of the House of Bourbon had that. So the question that people had, and this racked in the first half of the 19th century, how do you reconcile the rights of the different Italian princes with the aspirations of the Italians to be one people?
Yeah.
How do you... and actually they did come up with a solution, which probably would have done fairly well. That was what was called the Convention of Vilafranca in 1859. It was the idea of basically of Italy becoming a federation, with all of the princes, including the Pope, retaining their temporal power, and yet Italy being a larger thing. Then, of course, the question was, all right, but who's going to be the head of it, the Pope or the King of Sardinia?
Mm.
And if it was the Pope, wouldn't he be too involved in
Right.
Italian affairs? Then if it was the King of Sardinia, well, what would this do to the temporal independence of the Holy See? See, these are constant problems that you can't just wish away.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you established a single Kingdom of Italy. In 1929, the Lateran Treaty was held to have safeguarded the Pope's temporal position while allowing Italy its national aspirations. But, of course, if you're a Southern Italian, you don't think too much of that. And here's one of history's little indications that things are not as you're always told. Prior to the reunion of Italy, the Risorgimento, there was very little immigration from Italy.
Mm.
Afterwards, millions left.
You're right.
And that, you look at that and you say, well, but it's a very involved question.
Right.
And if you were to restore the Papal States, what picture would that take? What would that look like? And the answer is, I don't know.
Okay.
But it's certainly something that should be looked at.
Okay.
Now, the Holy Roman Empire, that's the other question.
Oh, yeah.
And again, if you mean what do we mean? Do we mean the Holy Roman Empire as it was when it was abolished in 1806? If it was abolished, because that's another funny thing about the Holy Roman Empire. What happened was the emperor abdicated and absolved all his subjects of their allegiance. But you see, an institution does not cease to exist just because someone has abdicated.
Wow.
So there's a theory of law that the Holy Roman Empire continues, especially because theoretically all of the Christian nations belong to it.
Wow.
Not only that, but there remain institutions that are imperial institutions. Even the King of Italy, as King of Sardinia, as Duke of Savoy, had the title Perpetual Vicar of the Empire in Italy. And he had that until the last of them was tossed out in 46. So there is a theory that it survives as a ghost. But what are its boundaries?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a problem because, in theory, the Holy Roman Empire was the successor of the Roman Empire, just as the Byzantine Empire was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And of course, the Russian Tsars claimed to be the successors of the Byzantines, the Third Rome idea,
Right.
which is another one of these ghostly things. Here's the fun thing. The Emperor Theodosius, you've heard of Emperor Constantine, the Edict of Milan, which allowed the faith to be tolerated. What is not so commonly spoken about, possibly because it's embarrassing, is 50 years later, when the Emperor Theodosius the Great passed what was called the Edict of Thessalonica.
Okay.
in which he made Roman citizenship dependent upon baptism.
Wow.
When you were baptized, you became a citizen of the empire.
Wow. So,
Yeah, so in a sense, the argument can be made that there's not a question of reestablishing the Holy Roman Empire, but simply reincarnating it.
wow.
So there's that. Secondly, it's important to bear in mind that the idea of the Holy Roman Empire, as opposed to its most recent incarnation, the idea of a unified, of a political entity encompassing Christendom, is a dream that's very powerful in human history, and not just for Christians. If you look at the foundation of not just the European Union, which obviously referred in a lot of ways at the beginning, not now. Now it's become some sort of weird deal.
Yeah.
But under its founders, de Gasperi, Schumann, Adenauer, and people like that, they very much thought about it as kind of a reincarnation of the Holy Roman Empire. And no less than Father Aidan Nichols has thought about the idea of ensouling the European Union with the Holy Roman Empire.
Right.
But beyond that, when you look at the foundation, not just of these United States, but also of the United Nations, there's a lot of conscious or unconscious referring back to the ideas behind the Holy Roman Empire. Even when you look at non-Christian nations like the Empire of China, the Middle Kingdom, where the Emperor of China was believed to be the sovereign of the whole world, and the sacrifices that he carried out to heaven and earth and so forth for good crops and so on, were believed to be not just for the Chinese, but for everybody on the globe. It's because we human beings have two basic and contradictory political impulses. We want to pull everybody together in an all-encompassing unity, and we also want our own people to be separate from everyone else.
Yeah.
The most successful empires have been able to combine these two. That's why in Austria-Hungary, for instance, you had all these different duchies and so on. So yeah, the emperor is my emperor, but he's also my king as King of Bohemia. Or he's my archduke as Archduke of Austria. Or he's my Grand Prince as Grand Prince of Transylvania, or whatever. Just as, and this is a mirror, because the idea of the Holy Empire is a mirror of that of the Holy Church. If I live as a Catholic anywhere, then the Pope is the head of my church.
Yeah.
If I'm Latin Rite, then he's my patriarch, as Patriarch of the West, even though they don't use the title. But if I happen to live in Italy, he's also my primate, that is the leading bishop of the nation, as primate of Italy.
Yeah.
But if I live in one of the dioceses around Rome, he's also my metropolitan, as metropolitan of the Roman province. And then if I'm fortunate enough to live in the city of Rome, he's my bishop, my metropolitan, my primate, my patriarch, and my pope all at once. Whereas if I were a Ruthenian Catholic, say like some of your cousins,
Yeah.
my only connection to him would be as pope. Because I'm under the Bishop of Parma, Ohio. I'm the Ruthenian bishop.
Yeah.
I'm under, well, actually Ukrainian would be a better example. I'm under the Ukrainian Major Archbishop / Patriarch. And my connection with the Holy See is only through the Pope, not through the Latin Rite.
Interesting.
Not through the Latin Rite primate of the country, not through the Latin Rite metropolitan, and surely not through the Latin Rite bishop. So this concept of many different levels of authority and many different kinds of allegiance to the same individual is very present in the church, and it was very present in the idea of the Holy Empire. So, to answer the question, would it be good to restore it? Well, it depends on what. I mean, I love Father Nicholas's idea of ensouling Christendom with the imperial institution. And again, if you follow the theory of some legalists, the empire never left. And you and I, by virtue of our baptism, are proud subjects. All we lack is an emperor. And if you think about it, that's happened before. Between 476 and 800 in the West. Since 1453 in the East, unless you accept the czars. So, we're just in an interregnum right now. We're between emperors. And as soon as we get one, everything will be fine. He'll restore things.
Wow.
Like the return of the king in Middle-earth.
That's true.
We await the coming of the emperor.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe it's even true.